Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. In episode 76 of the show, we discussed Mithridates VI of Pontus, a ruler of the kingdom of Pontus, who is famous for his building up immunity to poisons and is the namesake of Mithridatism. The reason I bring this up now is because today's topic also concerns a daughter of Mithridates VI, called Drypetina. Today, we're going to be looking at Hyperdontia and Hypodontia. Hyperdontia refers to having too many teeth in addition to the 32 teeth we usually have, or 20 so-called primary teeth. It is less common than its counterpart of Hypodontia, meaning having too few teeth. In both cases, genetics appears relevant in its occurrence. The two conditions can even show up together in something called concomitant hypo-hyperdontia, or CHH. Definitely the biology word of the week. Anyway, all well and good, you might be thinking, but where is this connection to Mithridates VI and episode 76? Well, to introduce us to the relevant characters, I'm going to reference a primary source by the name of Ammianus Marcellinus. Marcellinus is a Roman historian who wrote a history account which we have books 14 to 31 for, spanning from 353 CE to 378. In book 16 of his work, Marcellinus mentions Drypetina in what feels like a distracted flashback. He mentions her as the daughter of Mithridates, and says that she suffered from some serious illness which he doesn't elaborate on or mention by name. There isn't really any other detail here except her ultimate fate of being cured by a man called Menophilas and then killed so she wouldn't fall into Roman hands at the end of the siege of somewhere called Sinorium. Now, that doesn't give us a lot to work with. However, her Wikipedia states that she had a double row of teeth. That said, they themselves do not cite any sources for this, and I am left wondering if the illness Marcellinus says she suffers from was the double row of teeth. It doesn't seem likely to me because it feels like other illnesses could have explained the description he gives, but it's interesting to think about. Now, one page of a different historical character which does cite sources in claiming double rows of teeth is that of Louis XIII of France. Louis XIII was King of France between 1610 and 1643, and was the father of the far more famous Louis XIV, or the Sun King. He was also the brother of Henrietta Maria, the wife of Charles I of England, he of getting beheaded after the Civil War's fame. Anyway, the reason I bring him up today lies hidden in a 19th century book series of autobiographies. The 8th volume of this series concerns Edward Lord Herbert of Cherbury, who died in 1691. Crucially from our perspective, he was made ambassador to France, apparently in 1619, with the goal of renewing its alliance with England. He set off from Dover with a company of about 100 and arrived in Boulogne. From there, he made his way towards Paris. Incidentally, we know from his autobiography that he arrived in Paris on a Saturday, which I think is delightful as a trivial bit of detail to just throw in there. Anyway, point being, he arrived at the royal court in Touraine and asked to speak with the king and queen. For context, these would have been a young Louis XIII and Anne of Austria. Herbert met Louis and cozied up to him, reminding him of the friendship between James I and Henry IV of France, who had agreed that whoever died first would take care of the child of the other. This is probably more a diplomatic nicety than anything serious, although it would be funny to imagine the young Louis XIII or Charles I travelling to each other's country to be educated. Now, after all of this diplomatic wrangling, we finally come to the biologically relevant stuff. In page 116 of his autobiography, Lord Herbert leaves us a description of the king. Herbert tells us that Louis didn't speak very much, owing to the fact that he had a very bad stammer. Frequently, his tongue would be held outside his mouth for quite a while before he could even speak. Louis did not sweat a lot and was never seen blowing his nose and spitting. All well and good, but the ambassador tells us that Louis had 2 rows of teeth. So again, a case of hyperdontia. We will leave the rest of the description for a more historically minded podcast. However, what I will say is that if you want to get a bit of an impression as to what kind of man Herbert was talking to, Louis was born in September 1601, so at this point when Herbert met him, he would have been in his late teens. We now turn to a 2021 paper in the Journal of Dental Studies. This tried to establish how prevalent CHH, hyperdontia and hypodontia were in patients who went to the School of Dental Medicine clinics in the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. This study assessed 1,101 patients in total. Of these, 23 had hypodontia. However, hyperdontia was far more prevalent at 186 individuals. This comes out to just under 17% of the individuals assessed. 3 patients also had CHH, meaning 212 out of the 1,101 patients assessed had one of the 3 conditions we're discussing today. What I will say is that the thought occurs to me that the database we're looking at is specifically people who turned up in a dentist school. Accordingly, it seems at least possible to me that we might be getting confirmation bias in how high these percentages are. What I mean by this is, the numbers we're seeing here are higher than they are in the population in general. If I were to speculate, it does seem possible that people who have different numbers of teeth from usual might go to the dentist or dentist schools more frequently, or else might be more likely to report to one of these dentist schools for this study, but hey, I don't know. Regardless, as an example of how much higher these numbers are, CHH frequency is cited earlier in the paper as sitting somewhere between 0.002% and 0.7% of the population. In this paper, CHH is present in 0.27% of the patients surveyed, which, although still within the range, is significantly higher than the low estimate. In its introduction, the paper also notes that hypodontia is more common in white Americans, while black Americans were more likely to have hyperdontia. In terms of their recurrence, it cites one study in saying that hypodontia ranges between 2.2 and 10% in its occurrence worldwide. Further investigation on my part tells me that this study looked at 4,006 kids of Caucasian ancestry between the ages of 9 and 6. Another cited study stated that hypodontia occurrence was somewhere between 0.1 and 0.38%, which is obviously lower. This 2009 paper looked at both hypodontia and hyperdontia in 139 patients and found that, in cases where teeth were missing, women were missing them more often than men. As a final thought, it's not only Louis XIII and Drypetina who are mentioned as having hypodontia. A webpage by the London dental specialists also lists the Roman Agrippina the Younger and Emperor Ku as having had the condition. Agrippina is specifically mentioned as having had an extra tooth on the left side of her top jaw, as confirmed by Pliny the Elder in his Natural History. Incidentally, this same volume also taught me that her son Emperor Nero was a breech baby born feet first. The things you learn on random rabbit hole journeys are incredible. That rather random thought brings us to the end of today's episode. As always, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch with the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.